Butler.
Yes.
We fully expect Senator Vincent Ford to be here as well. I'm also expecting Erin Haynes from the Office of the Governor, who has accepted our invitation, and I understand she's running a little bit late, but she should be here as well. Howard Henley, Georgia Department of Education. Tracy Ann Nelson, GAE, Georgia Association of Educators. Angela, they have Palmer here, but I know it's Angela Palm. Angela Palm, Georgia School Board Association. We also have our superintendent in DeKalb County, Micah Thurman, DeKalb County Superintendent. And we also have Adelia Turner of Georgia Federation of Teachers.
She will be here.
She will?
Yes.
If I did not call your name, then I'm going to ask you to come back and sit back here with me, because we do not have you all on our list of invited candidates. Yes. But if you will come back here and join us, and we're going to find a seat for you once we get all of our panelists seated. Ms. Johnson? And Dr. Jones. And we're going to have our caucus members who come in as we proceed with our meeting. Thinking for someone like me to moderate this event, and I like to be up and about, so panelists, if you see me up and about, moving around, I believe if I speak loud enough, everyone can hear me. It's so much better if I'm down in front of the panelists. While we proceed with our discussion, I'm going to ask our former chair of the Black Caucus, Representative Al Williams, if you will welcome everyone, and then we're going to go ahead and get this panel discussion started. And just after Representative Al Williams welcomes everybody, I'll give you a few ground rules for our discussion.
Certainly welcome to every one of you here today. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that. A special welcome to my former neighbor. And I was her deacon over 20 years ago at Mount Carmel. Wave at him, see if I didn't do a bad job at all. Good to see you, but certainly we welcome each of you to this very, very important hearing today. We have some very distinguished panelists, experts in their areas, and we're excited about listening to them. Certainly we'll all be better for it. And thank you very kindly and welcome again.
Is that?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that welcome. Let me just go over a few ground rules for this panel discussion. One, I'm going to ask my panelists if they would be, of course, respectful of each other. And there's a lot of questions that we want to go through today, a lot of information that we want to cover. We're here to talk about education in the great state of Georgia. And when you speak, if you could not give these long-winded questions, answers, if you will, and I certainly want to allow, I'm going to be asking the questions, but I also want to allow members out of the audience to ask questions as well. And I'm going to ask our members out of the audience, if you will, just kind of refer your questions to me when I call you at the appropriate time, and I'll ensure that the question that you all may have is answered by one of our panel members. At this time, I want to give the panelists an opportunity to go around and introduce yourself to our audience. You'll just tell us what group you represent as well, and any opening statements, and we're going to each of you 2 minutes.
William Son.
Started down here with Mr. Kemp.
Thank you so much, Senator. My name is Howard Henley. I work with the Department of Education as the Director of Policy. In a previous life, I was also a principal at 3 different high schools, in Tri-County High School in Buena Vista, Georgia, Dublin High School in Dublin, Georgia, Americas High School in Americas, Georgia, and I was superintendent in Jeff Davis County in Thomaston, Epsom City. And I've been working with the Policy Division now for 5 years and with the State Department of Education for 8 years.
Glad to have you with us.
Thank you, sir.
I'm Angela Palm. I'm the Director of Policy and Legislative Services for the Georgia School Boards Association. I've been with the association for 9 years. I got into this because I was a parent who was concerned about what was happening with our schools. A long time ago, when my son started in kindergarten, he's 27 now, so you know how long I've been doing this. I got started in this in PTA. And just was curious, and I just kept learning, and I was down here volunteering at the General Assembly, and eventually got hired to do what I had been volunteering to do. So for those of you who are here as parents or community members, I understand, and I have spent most of my working life as volunteering, working with communities, so I thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tracy Ann Nelson, and I'm the Director of Government Relations for the Georgia Association of Educators. I've served in that role for over 3 years, or 4 years actually. And in my capacity, I am responsible for policy analysis and review on public education as it exists in Georgia.
Good afternoon. I'm Helen Butler, Executive Director of the Coalition for the People's Agenda. I'm a civil rights activist, I would guess you would say, and certainly our organization is convened by Dr. Joseph Lowery, who is a civil rights leader. And of course, education to us is very critical to communities of color. The bedrock of the civil rights movement started with Brown versus Board of Education. And if you don't have education, you don't have anything. So we're here to speak on behalf of education being a civil right.
Thank you.
I'm Michael Thurman. I'm superintendent of the DeKalb County School District. And most importantly, I drive a legacy vehicle. No, I'm just kidding. Which is why I got invited, actually. Otherwise, I would not be here today. But no, I'm proud to represent the DeKalb County School District. We're the 3rd largest district in Georgia, 101,000 students, and nothing, as Ms. Butler stated, is more important than ensuring that our children and generations not yet born have access to a quality education.
And our caucus members, just tell us who you are, please.
I'm State Representative Sandra G. Scott. I represent District 7 and 6 out of Clayton Henry County.
I'm Representative Dexter Sharper. I'm also the Treasurer for the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus. I represent Valdosta, Georgia area.
I'm Al Williams. I represent Liberty County, District 168 on the coast of Georgia.
And we have 2 other guests back there joining you. Just tell us who you are, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Deidris Jones, Georgia PTA Legislative Chair.
Glad to have you here with us.
Nancy Flake Johnson, President of the Urban League of Greater Atlanta.
Thank you. Well, let's kind of get started right away. We're here to talk about the governor's proposal for opportunity school districts. Starting, let's go in the opposite order. That's right here in the middle with you, Tracy. Tell us about opportunity school districts and
What it does.
Give us an overview, please.
Sure. So the proposal that the governor has brought us would be to create a school district called the Opportunity School District, which will require a constitutional amendment, which we'll be voting on in 2016 if it passes, to create a school district operated out of the governor's office and managed by a appointed superintendent. The schools that would be identified to participate in the Opportunity School District would be schools that are described as failing, which based on the CCRPI, which is College and Career Performance Index, perform at 60 or below on that performance index. While that's what is said, that definition is actually not in the legislation. So that could change. It could be 60 this year, 70 next year, 80 the year after. I'm just saying. As a school district, as a state level school district, it would have the right to identify the schools and take them away from the local district. It would take the children, the buildings, and then have the right.
Let me just kind of stop you right there for a moment, because one thing that you mentioned was the impact that this legislation would have on school boards. Ms. Palm, what do you think about that? Do you see an impact this legislation would have on school boards? What are...
Yes, yes, it has a big impact on school boards. When you read the legislation, when you read Senate Bill 133, if you look for local boards in there, most of the references to it are they're doing what they're told. The only people who should be able to tell the local board what to do are the voters.
Amen.
And the community. And in this, the OSD, the Opportunity School District Superintendent, is given complete power to do a number of things. But that person will be in charge of how it runs, and that person will be the one who makes any agreement with the local board if the model is chosen as a shared governance. I don't want to get too far down the weeds at the moment, but at every juncture here, this superintendent is running things. If the school is going to be returned to the local board, for instance, even then, the local board is only part of the negotiation. It says the superintendent will negotiate with the community and the school and the local board. Now, there ain't no negotiation on the front end of this thing when they're taking the school. So, on the other end, if the school's coming back to the local board, then shouldn't it just be a simple transfer back the way it was on the front end? So,
And I need you to hold that thought as well. Let me go over to Mr. Henry for a moment, because there is some language in here regarding DOE, and we all know we have an elected superintendent already. How do you think these two, the OSD as well as the DOE, will work if this proposal and this package passes?
I think, Senator Jones, I think that's an interesting proposition, and somewhat like the proposition that currently exists with the authorities. We have a elected state school superintendent, and we have a state board who's appointed by the governor. So there are 14 of those by congressional district. So again, it would take a lot of communication would have to take place for that to work, and a lot of people have to be on the same page at the same time to really make it work. One thing I would say, though, in reference to the current bill, and as I think Ms. Palmer said, the bill has changed, but one thing that I actually did like was something that I know that you've supported was positive behavior interventions and supports. I think that was added to, by the way, very recently, that was put into the bill. So changing the school climate, I think that's one thing we could all agree on is critically important to the school and the school's success.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that. I offered it up as an amendment when this bill was over in the Senate, by the way. We already got voted down. I'm glad to hear that's moving along as well as Senate Bill 164. There's a lot of talk about the role of the superintendent, and we have one of the finest superintendents in the great state of Georgia, who I just have to call on. To our superintendent, Michael Thurman, give us your thoughts on how you see this position operating. And I'm glad to see that one of our other representatives, Winfred, just stepped in. I'm going to ask if you would kind of sit on this final row back here, please, for our other elected officials.
I just always gravitate to the greatest superintendent.
Thank you, Representative. We are expecting a couple of the guests to arrive, later on members, and we're trying to keep the panel
I'm
intact.
disappointed I don't get to sit next to you. That's all right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and first of all, thank you all for inviting me here and taking up what is this critical issue. It's interesting, this the Opportunity School District legislation in terms of its impact on public schools. And there are many. The thing that I focused on most consistently is the definition of failing schools. And what I've said from the very beginning is that we accept the premise that the schools that have been projected on the list are actually failing without doing any due diligence to determine as to whether or not that's true. And also, how do you define failing? And for instance, in DeKalb, we have 137 schools, and 25 are on the list as quote failing. But I brought with me and I've shared with members of the caucus some data about those schools, and I think it's true of other schools. That if you look at the CCRPI data, you will find that particularly in DeKalb, that 23 of those 25 schools have shown significant improvement and growth over the last 2 years. And I've said consistently that an improving, growing school that is improving the academic performance of their students is not a failing school.
Right.
And it's a recognition that some students arrive in first grade at our doors with deficits that other students may not have. And consequently, as educators, our only responsibility then is to grow those students so that over a period of time, they are actually able to hopefully catch up. And one of the things that we really, and many of us don't know it, but across the state of Georgia, minority and disadvantaged kids are actually growing at a rate that's greater than the rate of their white peers or the state average.
I think you should say it again.
And Doc, we have some extra copies that we'll share with you. That was a front page article that appeared in the AJC on Monday, June 16, 2014. And the headline was, "Minorities, Other Groups Gain Academic Ground in Georgia."
I don't think a lot of us saw that.
Yeah, and well, thank you, yeah. And then sometimes you see things and because the public narrative is always negative, that you filter it out and you see it and don't even process it. So the first paragraph in this article was, "Across Georgia, the pernicious education gap between white children and other key student groups have been narrowed, according to new test scores released by the Georgia Department of Education." Right? And it pointed out, and then I'll stop, I don't want to take, Hispanic 8th graders tested this spring scored 26 percentage point higher than 8th graders in 2009. In math, the rate among black 6th graders was 12 points higher than 5 years ago. In each case, the gains on the CRCT test by these groups outpaced academic growth among whites. And if you look at the growth data from DeKalb, as I say, 23 of the 25 schools had documented verifiable growth, Mr. Chairman, in one of the last 2 years. And in 2012, there were 44 schools in DeKalb that had a CCRPI achievement overall score of less than 60. Today, 2 years, 3 years later, is 25. That's a 43% decrease. And I'm mentioning DeKalb only because I have the data, but I believe that this is true in districts all across Georgia. So the first question is, how do you define failing?
So that's a good question, and Ms. Butler, how would you define failing?
Well, certainly it's not by that. Here's what I would say. I don't really know how to define failing schools other than kids not having equal access, not having the resources necessary to really to excel at learning. To me, if they don't have the resources to excel. And I would say if you really want to fix the failing schools, how about putting the $68 million or so that we've taken out the budget over these last decade back into the budget?
You're talking
so
about the $67 billion.
Yes,
right?
yes, yeah, B, right. So that the teachers can have extra resources, you can have the social workers, you can have the psychologists necessary, you can have the healthcare professionals, you can provide great nutrition for people to learn. Kids coming to school have other problems and they're not really dealing with learning.
Let me ask you a question. Are you familiar with the Senator Ford's bill?
Yes.
Okay. Senator Ford's bill talks a lot about what you just shared with us. And Tracy, I know you're familiar with it, and Angela, and hopefully Mr. Henry, you are as well. Give us a moment, just talk a little bit about, Tracy, if you will, bring everybody up to date. Senator Ford is late arriving, of course, about his opportunity, his community students.
So Senator Fort's bill says if there are schools, first we do a needs analysis, and if there are schools with challenges, then we would define the services needed for those schools to get what they, for the children to get what they need, and the teachers also. So it's really about the community involvement and wraparound services that schools need to thrive. The bill hasn't gotten a hearing, but what we do have is data of that model working in other parts of the country and being quite successful, because it not just inspires the children and the teachers in the school, but it involves the entire community who becomes vested in the success of that school and those children.
And before we get too far off, my other guest back here in the back, we have Ms. Johnson from the Urban League. Tell us position of the Urban League regarding this particular issue.
Well, Urban League's concern is accountability.
Can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Urban League has several concerns about the bill. One is accountability, that there's a lot of vested power in the office of, in the governor's office to appoint this superintendent for this Opportunity School District, that not even the House representatives, from our understanding, would have input into who that person would be. So that's a concern. How do parents, what will change in terms of access to information about student achievement? There's a lot of unanswered questions, I think, with this bill that has a lot of us concerned. And so at the end of the day, one thing for sure, we know that Georgia schools are ranking against other schools across this country. We're not in the top 10. And we want our kids to get there. And with the information that superintendent shared, I wasn't aware of that article, but it's good news to know that our kids are outpacing other ethnic groups in closing the gap. But we know that they're still behind. So we got to do more, but we're moving in the right direction.
Is it not true that the Urban League has a lot of initiatives out there that you take young adults?
Yes.
That may not have had an opportunity to complete their education, that you all have an initiative that you will tell me about that.
Okay, I'm happy to tell you about that, and also something about the GED test, because as we talk about education, K through 12 is where we typically focus, but we have a huge adult education issue that we must address, because a lot of the parents have not completed their high school credentials. 850,000 adults just in this region are functionally illiterate. And so one of the things—
What do you define as this region, like the Atlanta Metro?
The Atlanta Metro, that's not a state of Georgia number, it's much bigger than that for the whole state. But we're concerned statewide, and so here's the thing. Only 67% of Georgia's high school students are completing high school in 4 years. Out the gate, that pattern, that puts a number of young people on a pathway toward poverty or prison. So our programs are designed to capture those young people, give them a chance to connect with a career pathway, and we dually enroll them in technical college if that's an appropriate fit, or we support them to complete their GED. Now, really quickly, I got to share this with you.
Very quickly.
The changes in the GED have made dramatic shifts in the outcomes. The last time under the old test, 22,000 adults earned their GED.
last year with the new changes, which aren't necessarily bad changes, but no resources to help people hit this higher bar, 3,227, an 83% drop in the number of adults, young adults and older adults who are
Ms. Turner,
passing.
you've been expecting,
So,
please.
the GED and high school diplomas are the gateways to the middle class and post-secondary education. If we don't get this right, people are gonna have a pathway to poverty.
Thank you. And we have another guest that joined us. You represent the PTAs?
Yes. Hi, I'm Dr. Deidre Jones, Georgia PTA. And the flagship initiative of Georgia PTA is family engagement. And this is something that is absent from the Opportunity School District bills. And I don't see anything anywhere where it's mentioned about a local school advisory council where parents are there, or a board where parent representation, or if a child has a problem where they have to go to the superintendent, there's not a parent council. There are a lot of things that where the parent is removed, and so that is something that we'll greatly look into and would like to. It's one reason why we are shaking our head at this bill.
Well, I think there's a lot of us out here that's shaking our head. I'm gonna throw this question out to the panelists. I'm gonna throw this question out there for the panelists, and I'm asking the questions, thank you. But the question is, what would you do in your respective roles to improve this legislation? Ms. Henley, let me just start over here first.
Just was
Other than get rid of it, we know that.
Just was having some thoughts. Senator Jones has heard
Turn his mic on, please.
some of the other
Mic check.
some of the other panelists.
Okay.
But I think many times we try to treat education issues as if they're in a vacuum, and they're not. They're quality of life issues, and it takes all the agencies. It takes DFACS, it takes Department of Juvenile Justice. I'll just share with you anecdotally, and this happened a long time in my career, but it was an eye-opener for me. It was a career changer for me. But I had a young man when I was principal at America's High School who had made perfect attendance. And I gave him his certificate of perfect attendance for the year. And I said, thank you so much for being such a good attender. And his response, and I'll never forget this with Dr. Henley, I enjoyed coming to school, but you know what? And I said, no. His name was James. And James said, I came to school because I was assured of 2 meals a day that I might not get otherwise. And that's an eye-opener when you get that. That changes the way that you view education, and that changes the way that you view your mission.
The question is, what would you do to improve this legislation? I'm going to jump down here. Ms. Campbell, good to have you here with us from DeKalb County. We got a lot of DeKalb County folks here, and I want you to sit next to your superintendent, by the way. I'm going to call the superintendent next. Superintendent Thurman, what would you do to improve this legislation?
Great question, Senator. First of all, let me say this. I think this presents those of us who advocate and support public education with an unprecedented opportunity. Often blessings are disguised in very bad legislation, right? Number one, and I've said this publicly, it is focused attention on disadvantaged, underperforming students. Now, I, for one, will not defend what are failing schools. And I don't think anyone else in the room should either. Because it's really not about the adults, it's about children. And we do have some schools, in fact, in DeKalb or across the state that are what? I mean, it's just a fact. And we also recognize that school is a part of it, but not all of it. The gentleman to the left mentioned, and I'm so glad PTA is here. We did an analysis of all of our schools when I first came, and it's interesting. Student performance decreases as parental engagement decreases.
Yes, amen.
Say that one more time. I don't think I got that.
Yes.
Student performance decreases if just looking at PTA participation, as it decreases, student performance increases. Now, I lost some of my amen.
Amen.
Right.
We listen.
Parents are more important than schools and superintendents and school board members. And teachers and principals. So part of what we're doing is we're building capacity of our parents to be more proactively engaged in supporting the educational careers of their children. I mean, we at home, it's just us, right? So that's a part of it. So if we can help the state of Georgia, first of all, recognize that all of our students are not failing. If we could believe it.
That's right.
See, the worst thing about propaganda and bias and prejudice is when you become convinced of it. Who that Carter G. Woodson said, if it ain't a back door, you go find one.
All right.
Right? I'm gonna repeat, our children are not failing.
Amen.
The data documents it.
That's correct.
This civil rights legend. Think about it, when you talk about the achievement gap.
And I'm gonna make sure we get a chance to go around.
Yeah, because I'm gonna have to go. And what I would do.
Go ahead.
What I would do if I was a member of the General Assembly, because y'all the only one got the power to do it.
Right.
I won't say what I do as superintendent. I'm gonna speak if I had a seat in the House of Representatives.
Okay.
Again.
Right, I was about to say you did.
Knowing the political dynamics, win, lose, or draw. We don't know whether the voters gonna accept it or not. We don't know whether to pass it or not, but we know the governor gonna put everything in his power. I would make sure this bill did as much as it could to support educational opportunities for my children. The one key thing that this bill could do is that it could recognize and transform the understanding and value growth. Does that make, it doesn't sound like a lot, do it? But if it value growth, rather than 25 schools being on the list, it'll be 2.
Right.
There's no money too.
There ain't no money in 2.
Right.
And rather than my children going to a failing school, all of a sudden they go into a growing, improving school. And rather than me having failing teachers, I got teachers who are helping children progress. And rather than having failing principals, it changes the game.
Yes, it will.
I'll stop, because I know there's other folks.
Before we lose our panelists, by the way, does anyone have a question for Commissioner, Superintendent, Representative? There's so many titles.
It's hard for some folks to keep a good job.
Right here in the back, please.
Superintendent Thurman, could you talk about your upbringing and your childhood?
Hey, I'm 12 straight.
In 30 seconds.
I'm 12 straight. That's it. I don't have to say nothing else. 12 straight. They gave me a lifetime pass after the 6th grade. They didn't sign you up no more.
Thank you. Anyone else? Right here? Yes, ma'am.
Everybody is talking about parent involvement. I wonder if you realize what some parents are going through with their jobs.
Amen, that's what I was.
I met at a low-income wage rally a woman who had 3 children. She also had 3 jobs that paid minimum wages, and she said she rarely made 40 hours a week. And if she stays away from one of those jobs, she loses money.
Exactly.
And she doesn't have even a half-time job at most of them. So that's why a parent like that does not have time to interact with her school, her child's school.
I don't think, I heard your question. I don't think that was put into this bill. That's something that we tried to capture with Senator Ford's bill when it comes to the community school district, because that model takes into account the uniqueness of every school. There may be a school where parents are not as involved. It brings in additional resources to help to try to get the parents of the community involved. but those kids may need some nutritional information and extra nutrition in that particular area. And it does just that, but they need some extra counseling. So there's a lot of different components. I believe it's about 5 altogether. And each school that participated would have to be a part of it. So let me just kind of move on.
How
for
do
a
you
moment.
get that parent involved if she has
Well, we're here talking about opportunity school districts,
But she's typical.
and I understand your question. Superintendent Haigler.
I can help you. One of the things the study shows is not, and no disrespect to PTA,
Right.
is not the PTA involvement.
Right.
It's what really happens at home.
Right.
And one of the things that do, and I as a parent, if you ask what was the lottery today, but never ask how was school, and I'm not fussing, because I get it, but it's really it's at home.
Yes.
That's the piece. If you can get the PTA, fine, but it's really at home more than anything else where you make these and begin to create the values. It's not easy.
Right.
And it's not, it may not be the mother's fault. But I'm just saying, this is the reality. And so this is how you begin to deal with it without blaming anybody.
And before we go, I'll bring it down to you next.
Yeah, the question was asked earlier, what describes a failing school? And the standard of what they're saying is a failing school is failing numbers. If your test is low, if your standardized testing does not meet a requirement, you are considered a failing school. It doesn't matter that the fact that these children who are there at that school may be passing. May be passing when it comes to the standard core, the Common Core standards, what is taught, that is totally different than what that standardized test is. So you might want to look at what is a failing school. By their definition, a failing school is a school that is not making the mark on standardized testing.
Now, you sound like you have some experience in it. What's your background?
My name is Janetta Johnson. I'm the education chairperson for the Coalition for the People's Agenda, and I'm a parent advocate. Amen.
Glad to have you here. I invited Ms. Cameron to come up because we forgot to invite a lay person up there, someone from the religious community that could speak about this particular issue. And I know your background, and from a religious perspective, and Ms. Vidal, you're glad you made it here with us. We're going to get you to join in as well. And just give us your thoughts about this particular legislation.
Oh, thank you so much. And I just want to applaud the efforts you've made continuously as it relates to education and suspension and expulsion, trying to keep students in school. I applaud your efforts on that. Excellent. I just want to say, as a part of the, am I doing right here? Yeah. As a part of the religious community and also working with the Legislative Black Caucus, I want to say one of the things that we've done as a community, we started a GED program at our church. And it started because we had some of us had family members who had come back and had not graduated. And we started a program, and there were 9 of us who went to school to get our certification and certificates, including the pastor. And that's Chi Temple CME Church. And as a result of that, we started a program. I'm on the advisory council for Martin Luther King Middle School. And we work there with their academic honors, and we always invite those parents who need a GED to come to our program. Subsequently, we have a number of parents who are now coming to get their GED, and they're much older than the normal age. They've been out of school a lot longer. But the thing of it is, I think this legislation does not include any support for your outreach GED programs because all of it now is on computers. I think we had a number of students who had passed 4 parts of the test. You could take the test in sections. They only needed 1 part. In January, that stopped. So now they have to take the whole 5 parts again. I think that's horrible. Any student, that's the legislative change that should.
I certainly agree with you, but we're not going to see it in this bill. Let me get back to my original question. I'm going to ask Representative Williams, by the way. I have a hearing for Senate Bill 141 right at 3 o'clock. And I know we have this room reserved until 4. And of course, Ms. Palm, and everyone knows what 141 is, dealing with zero tolerance legislation. Very important to get heard in the House committee, by the way. So please excuse me if I run out of here for a moment, but I promise you I'll be right back. The original question I asked is, what would you do to improve this legislation? Ms. Palm?
pieces of legislation, actually. There's Senate Resolution 287, that's the actual constitutional amendment, and that needs some changes. First of all, whenever this bill is described, the other pieces, of course, Senate Bill 133, whenever this is talked about, frequently the supporters of it emphasize that there's a limit to how many schools can be taken, that they can only take up to 21 year, a total of 100. That limit isn't in the constitutional amendment. That limit would not go into the Constitution. So if we're going to say it's limited, and it should be, then that limit needs to go into the constitutional amendment. So that's one change that I would make to the constitutional amendment. I think that it should be clear, the language should be tighter, much more narrow and focused. I would also change the language related to funding. The constitutional amendment was changed before it got out of the Senate to make sure that when they take a school from the local board and it becomes a school in the Opportunity School District, one of the things they can do is make it be a state charter school. And if it becomes a state charter school, once it is renewed by the State Charter Commission, then it is completely out of the Opportunity School District. But the amendment has been changed, and it says in the legislation also, they will continue to get local funding forever. So it will be no longer in the Opportunity School District. It will be under the State Charter Schools Commission, but they will always get local funding, and that's wrong. So those are the things I would change in the constitutional amendment itself. There are a number of things that I would do differently in the bill itself, but I don't think you want me to talk about that.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask if you will please keep the murmurs down and be respectful. We're trying to hear what all of our panelists are saying. Thank you. Ms. Turner, you are the president for GFT, Georgia Federation of Teachers, and I know you've been out there advocating on behalf of passage of this legislation. I'm just teasing you. But introduce yourself, and the question I ask is, what would you do to improve this legislation?
I'm Dee Turner. I'm a native of Georgia, president of Georgia Federation of Teachers, and president of my local Atlanta Federation of Teachers. And thank you, Senator. I concur with the other panelists in terms of her suggestions. However, I cannot entertain bad legislation. This legislation needs to be defeated. There is nothing in this legislation that's an effective educational intervention for children, and we're supposed to be helping children achieve. So when we're measuring legislation by someone's definition in terms of what's failing and what's not failing, we'll have a problem with that. But, and if you would allow me, we all know that our schools need fixing. And we know that we're compared to international countries, and we're also compared to other states. The organization which compares us is the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. And every 3 years, they have a program of international student assessment, and they make recommendations. I think it's about 42 countries compared, and the United States is fourth from the bottom with pay. But we're number one with the number of hours our teachers teach in this country. You need to look at that report. When we're looking at Finland and Singapore, some of those interventions that they use, and I will have to say this, and I'm not trying to be self-serving, but we are the only profession where there is evidence-free policies passed that we have to carry them out. So it's hard for me to say anything about supporting or improving this legislation. We really just need the legislation defeated, and we need to start looking at proven methods for our children achieving in a world-class education system.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Bob, what would you do?
And I'm sort of like Ms. Turner. I'm sort of like Ms. Turner.
Get over there, corner.
I think it's bad legislation, but there's no control from the local level.
She finished talking.
We already have a state schools superintendent, and I don't see that structure, or state education, Department of Education structure, it's being usurped by this unaccountable person. I'm a voter, and I want to say so in what happens in my community. This legislation, I have no control, I have no say-so.
That's right.
Maybe a compromise might be is to do Senator Fort's bill with some of the things that would improve the schools. I might could tolerate that, but as is, I mean, it gives me no opportunity for control. It takes my money away as a taxpayer. And I don't want to give my money away to just anybody who has no accountability to me. If I disagree with any of the decisions, what recourse do I have? There's none there for me to have. So I would change some of those governance kind of structure. The funding I would change, but certainly you got to really do something to improve the situation. Now, I don't see this improving anything other than taking the money out of the school districts that are currently in place and giving it to this entity that is controlled by some outside people.
Absolutely, thank you, thank you. I have some of my good friends back here that's joined us by the representatives, an opportunity to just kind of chime in with anything that you would like to share regarding this discussion. And please introduce yourself again.
Good afternoon again. I'm State Representative Sandra G. Scott, Civic Clay in Henry County.
You've served on the school board before too.
Yes, I have. This legislation is not good legislation at all, and I do concur with what the others have said. First of all, when we talk about failing schools, I have been asking that question since I've been here. What is a failing school? How do we determine that a teacher is not a good teacher? And then to come with this legislation where we have heard from Tennessee, we have heard from Louisiana, but none of them have truly spoken the truth about what is actually really going on with their opportunity school districts. We all know that if you looked at any research, you will see that they are not doing as well as the governor wants us to think that they're doing. Their schools are still failing, and if you go there and you talk to parents, you will get the real picture on the opportunity school district. It was said the other day in the committee meeting that you can remove the principal, you can remove the teachers. The building will still be there, and it will have the same kids in the building. But without parental participation, you're still going to get the same results. And that is what's going on in our community. And as an educator, we just have a lack of parental engagement. And it's been said today, when you see parental engagement, you have better results.
Thank you.
And because of the lack of the results of parental engagement, that is why we have schools, and I wouldn't call them failing schools, but like to say, kids are steady moving up. You can start a school, kids in the, I'm gonna be done in 1 second. Kids come in, very seldom. You probably will have 20% of kids that have been to a school from kindergarten to 5th grade. Because of the rapid transient students, they come in, they go out, they come in and they go out. And then, so that is also a contributor to what's going on with these schools. Okay, I'll stop right there.
Thank you, outstanding, by the way. Representative Dukes, and Representative Dukes, if you don't mind, if you will kind of stand in my place, in my stead. If you have anything you want to add to the discussion, you're now recognized.
I'll be happy to stand, you know, whenever you want me to.
Okay, well, you need to come on, because.
Well, I know how things are around here. We have at least 5 things to do at one time.
Absolutely, particularly this time of year. We have another representative join us. Tell us who you are, please.
Yes, I'm Representative Bob Trammell from West Georgia, Deputy Mayor, Weather, Troup County.
and you're more than welcome to join us in this conversation. We're talking about SR 287, SB 133.
Thank you, I'm here to listen.
Thank you. Let's go back to my panelists again, and
How about letting me, I haven't said anything. Let's don't skip me. You're gonna make me disoperate? All right, there you go. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've listened, and there's some givens. We understand. I represent a semi-rural to rural district. What's happened with this legislation is there is nothing that addresses rural needs. There's nothing in Louisiana, there's nothing in Tennessee that addresses the needs of rural students. I'm blessed by whatever the definition is. I don't have one of them in my district, so I don't know what you call them. But I think the question is bigger than any individual district. It's a given that everybody wants to have a quality school system. But I don't think that our system should ever be designed that everything rests in the hands of any one person. And I can't entertain a bill that centralizes under one domain. My Lord, some folk left Britain to get away from this. I didn't leave Britain, but I was brought here. And I don't want to go back to one anything rule. Oversight's too crucial.
Thank you, Mr. Representative. One of the things I'd like to hear from is basically more from the department, people over at DOE, and how do you all feel like this is going to be implemented? You know, because as Representative Williams alluded to, you have a structure where now you can get as much as 5% of the student body in the state, and it is under one individual who has not been elected for anything by anyone, and yet still they have the authority to have that much influence over kids' lives.
And again, Representative, that raises a very interesting proposition, and I know that Ms. Palmer has already addressed that, but if you look in our Constitution, our current Constitution of Georgia, and you look at that section that says local school board member, you'll see it uses some very strong words in there, control and management. That's what the local Board of Education is charged with. So while we at the department do provide support to the districts, that control and management of those districts ultimately rest, or currently rest, with local voters, local taxpayers. You're the people that you go to the ballot box and you decide who you want to represent you on your school board. Because, again, I'll say this, I get a lot of constituent calls about governance, because a lot of people think that we actually call the shots, that we actually tell the superintendent, we tell the principal. We don't. Those are, that's the fundamental of democracy. So I would just say this, and I think my colleague Angela Palm would agree with me, that a district is only as good as that school board, so you need to spend quality time making sure those people are the people that you want to serve your needs and serve the needs of the boys and girls in your community. Is very important. But again, it is a major issue because of that balance of power. And us being a support institution, local school board members have an ultimate control and management over those schools as we currently stand.
Okay, but, and Ms. Palmer, maybe Ms. Palmer might have missed it, but we mentioned governance. And basically what it appears is that we're changing one form of governance for another. Did you all speak to that?
Yes, I think you're exactly right. The other thing I would point out with the question you had for Howard was the implementation of it. And one of the odd things with this bill is that we're accustomed to the Department of Education handling things and going to the department. And this bill shifts things to the Office of Student Achievement, which has, since its beginning in 2000, was designed for performance data and accountability. It has never been designed or staffed to be a department the way it would seem to be operating under this bill. And as far as the governance is concerned, it totally flips everything. It sidesteps the elected state superintendent, even the governor's appointed state board. The superintendent of this district is allowed to waive state board rules without the state board being involved. So it totally changes everything that we are accustomed to.
I was a part of that legislation that established that Office of Accountability, as you say, indefinitely, unequivocally. What they are trying to make it do is not the intention of that particular office. Representative Williams, did you have, I
have a question for the department, please. My question is, and I've heard what you said, I want to know, and I understand that you're under some restraints, but what does it do to the school board, the Department of Education, to have an elected superintendent that at this point is in Lullaby and has no say in education in Georgia?
Oh, my.
What does it do to the morale over there?
Certainly, that is a factor to be considered, is morale. And of course, we have concerns about that, and to your point, I am restricted in what I would get.
Dr. Henry, job security, modifying that. For the teacher groups, because basically we went from the State Department of Education to the board, now to the teachers, and those of you who represent teachers. I think the way the legislation is wrong, as it is now, or maybe they have changed it, but I know initially, you can come in and just fire a teacher. Basically, it's a RIF, a reduction in force. How would you feel, how would you think that this legislation could be changed such that teachers don't have an opportunity to lose their fair dismissal, which they have worked so diligently to achieve?
We would need to provide due process for the teachers. This is Bedelia Turner. Due process for teachers is fundamental, and it should be a basic right, and especially in any type of school. So that's one thing that we would want added if we were entertaining the bill.
Tracy Ann Olson with the Georgia Association of Educators, and I want to speak to a more broader thought process, if that's okay. This bill is wholly and completely unnecessary, and what it does is usurps the power of community and of school boards and of people who have actually voted. It also silos the Department of Education, because DOE would have absolutely no involvement in this OSD creation. But what people don't understand is the addressing of failing schools is already occurring in DOE. DOE is already identifying schools that are priority focus and alert schools. They do an assessment and figure out what those schools need in those buildings. So building level intervention in order to address the needs of that school. So what looks good at Meadow Creek looks different at, I'll name Monroe or whatever. So, I mean, but the creation of this OSD model or legislation does absolutely nothing to address building level issues. So why do we need it? We don't. We absolutely don't need it.
Well, you're absolutely right. I mean, we fought a battle here in 2000 that really gave the state the opportunity to do most of the things that the government is trying to do anyway here. But what we did it is that we did it in a capacity that respected the control of the people who has the primary interest of making sure the schools were run properly. That was the school board. We did it with the administrators and with the teachers. Much of what they're trying to do here is already in state law.
Exactly.
The only thing is that they're coming in and saying they want to take the place over.
They're moving everything into the governor's office.
Ms. Butler, do you have anything that you want to add or expound on that? Why do you think we're doing this?
Well, I don't know why you're doing it, other than maybe because the districts, the schools that have been targeted have lots of money. That the buildings are on good property, that they could be used for something else. I don't know, because as everyone has said already, we have systems in place. We have the Department of Education. You don't need another department to deal with educational issues. You've got to have the people at the local level in control because they know their communities. I can't go to Midway and tell them what I think based on what I'm doing in Morgan County.
Amen.
So, I don't see the need for it. Again, other than you've got a lot of money in terms of the budgets that these schools represent, and maybe a lot of good potential real estate market that some builders might want to have. Other than that, I don't see the need for it. We've had these Common Core standards, we've had all of these things put in place supposedly to help us improve our schools. The No Child Left Behind policy was horrible. And I think this is just taking money out of local control and putting it in a centralized pot to be used for whatever. For whatever it might be. But it does nothing to improve the education of the children. I mean, does it say that they're going to provide social services for these failing schools? No. Does it say there's a special curriculum that they're gonna have in place? No. I mean, it doesn't address the children's need. And that's what we have to look at, what is best for the children. And again, I go back to the main problem with all of the schools. If we put the $68 billion that we've taken out of the schools over a decade back into the schools, we'll be fine.
We've been joined by my classmate, Senator Ford. He's been here a long time too. And also we've been joined by Representative Dickinson and Representative Thomas. We are so glad to have you all here. Representative Ford, you were one of the panelists and you do the prior engagements. You're just getting here. And we certainly would like to hear from you, particularly the work that you've been doing on this matter.
Thank you, Representatives. I am not going to speak to the school takeover district bill. I think it's probably been thoroughly vetted already at this meeting. I will only say that, and I thought the governor, is the governor's folk here?
No.
I thought they were supposed to be here. They're running even later than me. But I will say about the school takeover bill that it is a bad bill. It is a bill that ought to be fought. It is a bill that will put teachers at risk. If you look at what happened in New Orleans and the dismissal of teachers, but you have to understand that in New Orleans, as here, there's a strategy behind it. Some of you should read a book by Naomi Klein called Shock Doctrine, about how what happened in New Orleans was a strategy and a plan by corporations and school reformers. But I'm not going to talk all about that because y'all, I hope there's a consensus in the room, if not total agreement, that it's a bad bill that ought to be fought. But we, as people of conscience and as legislators, have the responsibility to not just say no to bad things, although that's critical. We need to identify that which is bad and fight against it. But we have a responsibility to offer alternatives, to offer legislation and ideas that are alternative to their bad ideas. And to the extent that we do that, we're being forward-looking and positive, not just what, negative. The school reform movement is abroad in the land, financed by the Walton brothers, the Koch brothers, and other right-wing conservatives who use their money, their resources, in order to implement their agenda, their tax on teachers, closing schools, etc. Look at New York, look at Chicago, look at Atlanta, and we see the model replicated. But the greatest failing of the school reform movement is that they do not take into account the impact of poverty on education.
Exactly.
You can't expect the Waltons to. Walmart has as its agenda what? Exploiting working people. So you wouldn't expect them to say anything about poverty, would you?
No. Right.
But then, even those people that, even people of color who work for the school reform movement can't do it. And they know better, but they can't do it. They can't talk about poverty. Why not? Because you can't. If you can't take their money, hello, and talk bad about it.
Right.
No, not bad. You can't tell the truth about the people who feed it. We've had legislators who are no longer here with us who could not talk about that because what? They were taking their money from the Walton brothers, the Koch brothers. In any event, what we have done in SB 124 with the collaboration and assistance of teacher groups, particularly AFT, is started to say we need to present an alternative to this school reform stuff. That is the community schools model. SB 124 is a community schools model. The idea is that if a child has to, if a child does not feel good, if a child doesn't have health care, they're not going to learn. The fact of the matter is, in my district, the number one reason children miss school is what? Asthma. You go over to Grady Hospital, to the emergency room, and see those babies over there, they're suffering from what? Asthma. Okay? Children, we've already, what's become a cool issue? Food insecurity. Guess where food insecurity is growing amongst children, school-age children. There are children in our districts, truth be told, that from Friday and at lunch on Friday, that free lunch on Friday till Monday, may not have another meal. Or may have a meal or here or there, but for 2.5 days, what? Don't eat. You don't eat well. Or during the week, from lunch to the next breakfast, they may not eat. And let's not even talk about the summertime. So the community schools model says, amongst other things, that what you have to do is look at the needs of the community. Let the community help decide what it needs for the children. It may be not just a nutrition program, or a nurse practitioner, if not a doctor in the school, a nurse practitioner, but it may be what? Adult literacy classes. Because adult illiteracy in Georgia is a major issue. Right. And how can a grown person, a mother or a father, help their child with homework when they can't read? So if you help that parent to be able to help their child, you're helping the family. The idea is the community, the school is what? A community center that should not be locked up over the summer, should not be locked up at 5, and then everybody come back at 7 in the morning. I see I'm getting a signal from Brother Dukes. Wrap up. And I understand, but what we have to do, and I wanted to do a hearing this session, but there was so many bad things coming from the other side, we had to, you know, kind of put that on hold. But what we need to do, you know, as a Black Caucus, and, you know, whether you, or legislators of conscience, start growing this idea. I'm gonna go with AFT to Cincinnati if I can, and look at what they're doing there with this community school model that actually work, that actually help children, actually help families to become what we want them to be. That's what Senate Bill 124 does, and I'm glad to take any questions.
All right, it is 3:18, we're closing at 3:30, but before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Representative Howard from Augusta. And the chairman of the Democratic House Caucus, Representative Virgil Flood. And since so much has been spoken about the work that AFT has done in this, Mr. Turner, would you have anything that you want to add to this conversation?
I do want to add something. The OECD report, we hope everyone would take advantage of trying to find out more about that report. But the report was given to our United States Department of Education, and it said that if we could control for that poverty rate, we would be among the highest performing countries in the world.
If we could do what now?
So control for poverty. If we could close that gap, we would be among the highest performing in the world. But I want to add something to Senator Ford. Thank you, Senator Ford. Cincinnati is now the highest performing urban school district in Ohio. Every school is a wraparound school. There's another area in West Virginia, McDowell County, West Virginia, one of the most isolated areas in the country and one of the poorest school districts, where the governor himself invited businesses, the community, teacher organizations to come in, and all of us provided the resources, and we worked collaboratively, and we've turned that school district around. There are many other models that we could provide, but the question becomes if we really want effective education, or if we're going to allow our children to be political pawns. And I think most of us are dedicated towards our children and our future. I want to thank everybody here today also.
We want to thank you and thank all of y'all for the work that you have done. We have exactly 10 minutes. The legislative who came in, is anything that you all want to add to this conversation, or Representative Dickerson? Representative Thomas? Representative Howard? Okay.
I had one question.
Well, what I want to do is come back and give the panelists 1 minute to kind of wrap up. And sir? Yeah, you were speaking. If you can keep it within, about a good 90 seconds.
Maceo Williams, Atlanta Citizens Review Board. Bottom line, what I'm hearing here, and what I've viewed, is the fact that white folks is trying to take over black folks and minority people's territory, because one thing, the real estate that they sit on is valuable, the money is there, and they're taking over a situation, they're trying to capitalize on a situation because of a niche in the road. We got to get stronger. We got to know who's who and who's tap dancing. And we also got to make sure that whoever is tap dancing, we expose them so they're not the fly on the wall. Now, thank you.
And what we have to,
all right, Maceo.
Listen, what we have to be extremely conscious of and positive of is this. Everybody our color, not our kin.
Right.
And this rub people both ways. It's a lot of people who are not African Americans who feel like this is about your crap. And then there's a lot of folks who African Americans think it's the greatest thing in the world.
Right.
So we have to call it like it is. It is not based on, it's not based on. on your cue, but it's based on what's in your heart and how you feel like.
Excuse me, can I ask you a
That's
question?
what. No. Yes. See what you gotta.
Quick question.
Quick question.
Yeah, well, yesterday, the committee passed, the legislature passed out a committee. So now it's going to the House and it's going to the Senate. We do have a representative from that committee that is in this room, because unfortunately, we can have all the conversations that we want, but if these legislators decide to vote yes, this legislation is going to pass. So I need to understand from someone who has been intimate in these meetings, someone's on this committee who represent people that are in this room, help me understand how did it pass out of committee.
I can tell you.
Oh, I know you can, but we need to understand, because we're not fighting the right fight.
We need to know who's passing it so we can pass them out. I would like to have a report card of those who voted for this so we can get it into our communities.
You can get that. But here's the challenge. Once they vote on it, once they vote.
Wait a minute. Now you said you want to ask.
Yes, we need that.
And I granted you that liberty. You know, let's just gotta keep it, because nobody has voted any place yet, and your vote is a matter of public record.
Yes.
So there's no need for us to try to see if we can get this here. All that information gonna be there. You know, and you know, we deal with that like we deal with everything else. That's not the only thing that you know, it's a lot of votes that take place.
Right.
But what I would like to do, let's see, I got 6 minutes. So with that deal with everybody who's a panelist, 8 minutes to close out. So we, basically, Doc, do you have anything else you want to add before we close?
Yeah, just very quickly, Representative Dukes, I do want to commend Senator Jones, and if you're not aware of it, but he has been very instrumental in proposing legislation that really moves us from this zero tolerance area to a more reasonable area with regard to student discipline, and his efforts in supporting policy outstanding. So do want to say that to him and let you know that as well, so that you can continue to support him and applaud him in that effort. And the last thing I would say to you, just as you leave today, is think about this, because it's been captured. So many people have already said this, but I want to say it one way, very differently. What if every child in Georgia wanted to be in school, wanted to be there each and every day? Think about the difference that would make if they came to school and wanted to be there. What a radical difference that would make in the way that we deliver instruction. And that's my final point.
Thank you, Angela. Do you have anything you want to close?
Yes. As we talk about education reform, we've got to just start talking about the students and look at what are the obstacles to their learning and their achieving. What are the obstacles to the parents and the adults in their lives? It may not even be their parents, whoever it is, whether it's the people up the street, at the church, wherever it is. What is stopping them from being able to help that child the way that they need to be helped? What resources do we need to provide? When we start doing that, and that goes to Senator Ford's bill, but when we start doing that, then we can start addressing the root of the problem. And we can do all this other stuff all day long, and that's just move the chickens around.
Thank you, Angela.
I think our charge, as we address public education in Georgia through legislation, is always to look at improving the educational outcomes for children. That's what we're supposed to do. We have 3 school systems in Georgia, and we're talking about creating a 4th. All funded publicly. Private school system gets public dollars. Upwards of 58 million. Public schools have been under attack for the last several years and continuing to be defunded. We have a charter school system that also gets public dollars, and we're talking about creating a 4th system with a 4th, with a superintendent that has all power.
Actually, we have 5. We have the ones that they do in the criminal justice system, and we have the schools for the blind, which is both.
Well, I want to thank the Legislative Black Caucus for having this hearing, because it's very important. Education for us is the civil rights, and we've got to have the right formula. I don't believe this bill has the right formula for helping our children, and the end result is what is good for the children. This bill does not address that.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I had a quick question for the bill. Is that possible now?
No. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to make a comment.
Yeah, you want to do your comment?
Yes.
Okay, no.
I just want to say that there was legislation passed a few years ago that said on the state school board, each of those congressional district representatives were supposed to have a hearing and a meeting within their congressional district. And I don't think this is taking place. It would make it more intimate for the full congressional district person to come, and I think that needs to be reinforced. That's my statement.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, do you have anything, any closing statement? Yes.
Oh, one of the things I would like to say is, we're very reactive. Let's do some more proactive work. You know, the legislation session is going to end next week. Let's keep working. Let's get try to get ahead of some things and find out who the people are that are blocking the things we need. And let's not avoid those people. Let's go at them. Let's talk to them. Take them our cases and make, you know, it may not help, but we can't sit back and let things just happen. And that would be the thing I would like to advocate for.
Okay, Ms. Turner? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I would like to, just to see, we cannot just talk and not act. We have to take action. This bill it has no, I mean, the governance is not there. It does not support family engagement. It removes the IE square, everything, charter systems. I'm not even sure if they will have to, I mean, if those schools will even have to do Common Core standards. We don't know. So what I would like for us to do is to really go after, ask questions, contact your legislators, and we have to think positive and just do what we can, and then we'll have another.
Thank you very much. Ms. Turner.
Thank you for the opportunity, and thank the Black Caucus also for holding this forum. If you know it or not, teachers really know how to fix schools. One of the variables that's missing is that there's no collaboration with teachers. Georgia, one of the states, afraid to do that for some reason. And I'm going to talk about right to work, but I'm not going to talk about right to work. So when we compare the northern states, and we look at those standardized test scores, if that's the indicator we want to use, there's a reason those test scores are higher. A reason. One other thing I want to say is that the schools in New Orleans, where teachers did have input through meet and confer, the test scores and achievement was higher before Katrina than it is right now. So we need to do business different. What would happen to us? Where would we be if Dr. King didn't get out the box? He took that bullet by himself. We're going to have to get out of the box, and we want to ask everyone to talk to each and every legislator about this bill and the wisdom of not passing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Listen, it is.
You were slim. I'm on the panel too.
Your last statement was your first statement, but we'll give you.
That's right. I'm not gonna let you take my minute.
It was 3:30 exactly, and I was trying to
go let you look over. Now, people have said some brilliant things, and folk wanna find out how folk voted. I wanna impact their vote.
Right.
The fact of the matter is, let's be real here. The reason that constitutional amendment passed in the Senate is because a Black Caucus member voted with the Republicans.
That's right.
And I'm just being real. To come to this meeting and not talk about what's real is a disservice to the community that we serve. It's in the House right now. The Black Caucus has a responsibility in the House to stand up and push back. If you come here and you talk about all these things, or you come and listen and they vote, they need 120 votes. Some Republicans are going to jump ship, you know that.
Right.
And what we have to ask ourselves as black legislators, this meeting called by the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus,
There you go.
we have a responsibility.
Amen.
And I'm telling you, and we should not ignore the fact that it passed in the Senate because a Black Caucus member made a deal.
Okay.
And that's, and I, you know, 17 or 18 Democrats and every Black Caucus member except one voted against it. And that's the challenge. I don't want to know how folk voted down. I want to impact people vote right now before it goes. So we have a challenge, Brother Dukes. And
We
Black
gave the
Caucus.
senator 3 minutes, but it's okay. But he has been here 18 years, so he earned a few extra ones. And listen, and I'm going to speak to what he said. Listen, basically, this is the responsibility of the advocates. Let me tell you why. You see, I don't vote in Representative Williams' district. I don't vote in Representative Thomas's district. So me telling Representative Williams and Representative Thomas what they need to come up here to do in Atlanta, that's mute. That falls on deaf ears. I don't vote for him, he doesn't vote for me. But the people who have to do that, it has to come from the people who they represent.
So they need to know.
Yeah, and you need to tell them. That's not the role and the responsibility of the Legislative Black Caucus. So we want to be clear. That was actually not this kind of meeting. That's y'all meeting. Okay? Now we invited y'all to our meeting, but that's not our meeting. Now, and I wasn't going to do an editorial on that, but basically what I was going to do since it came up, so you can know where we are as caucus members and what we do. We are policy makers. And you have an opportunity to implement public policy through those of us who represent you. That's the way we do that. But now I don't sit here and made it past 3:30, but on behalf of the Georgia Legislative Black Caucus, we first of all want to thank our panelists coming in